The daughter of a merchant, Gabrielle Chanel witnessed the death of her ailing mother. Her father, unwilling to care for 5 children, sent them all to convents. The strict nuns forced Gabrielle to learn sewing, a skill with which she struggled. Later, she sang in cabarets. Attempts to become an actress or operetta singer failed, as her voice was too weak and her figure too slender. However, one day she crafted a simple straw hat for a famous courtesan. Gabrielle Chanel was a legend of 20th century fashion. Her iconic straw hat became a symbol of her brand and was followed by the little black dress and Chanel No. 5. Gabrielle revolutionized the fashion norms of her time, producing elegant and comfortable clothing that freed women from layers of fabric and lace. Today, we'll tell you how this remarkable transformation from poor orphan to fashion icon happened. Gabrielle Bonheur Chanel was born on August 19, 1883, in the town of Saumur. Her father, Albert Chanel, was a traveling merchant. The family had 5 children. Her older sister Julia, Gabrielle, her younger brothers Alphonse and Lucien, and her younger sister Antoinette. When Gabrielle was 11 years old, her mother died of tuberculosis. That same year, 1895, her father placed his daughters in an orphanage at the convent in Aubazine. There, life followed strict, even harsh rules. Along with general subjects like arithmetic, geography, and history, the girls were taught cooking and sewing to prepare them for independence. However, Gabrielle struggled with the simplest tasks, like hemming a skirt. She lost needles and pricked her fingers. Her work rarely impressed anyone. She felt deeply ashamed that her father never visited her. To avoid awkward questions, she invented a story. The future couturier told everyone that her father owned vineyards in America and couldn't simply cross the ocean to visit her. Sometimes she imagined that her father had left them for another woman. She would seethe with anger, picturing this woman in a luxurious lilac dress with a hat and feathers. Gabrielle thus developed a deep dislike for bright pink colors. However, she didn't spend all her time in Aubazine. During holidays, Gabrielle visited her Aunt Louise in Varennes. Louise made a living by refurbishing hats. Her niece learned to create alongside her. Gabrielle loved to stand out. She constantly criticized the gaudy and extravagant outfits of the women around her. She was drawn to minimalism, simplicity, and clean forms, as well as the color black. In addition to Louise, Gabrielle was extraordinarily close to her Aunt Adrienne. Gabrielle's grandmother had 19 children, and Adrienne was one of the youngest. Due to the small age gap between them, Gabrielle and Adrienne considered themselves more like sisters than aunt and niece. Moreover, they studied together at the hated Aubazine convent. One day, the prospect of separation threatened their sisterly bond. Adrienne sobbed as she handed Gabrielle a letter that described, in their eyes, a terrible fate. Adrienne was to be married off to an old, unattractive man. Instead of resigning themselves to this destiny, the girls decided to escape from the convent. However, their attempt failed because Gabrielle had not thought through the financial aspect of their plan. Later, they were sent to the boarding school of the Notre Dame Institute in Moulins, a far harsher place than Aubazine. 2 years later, Adrienne and Gabrielle found work as seamstresses at a shop called Holy Mary. Their duties were limited to minor clothing repairs and accessories, as they lacked the skills to sew garments from scratch. Adrienne and Gabrielle lived together in a small, somewhat shabby room on the outskirts of town. However, once out of the convent, Gabrielle felt liberated. When I was threatened with prison many years later, I replied that I had already served my time, she would later say. Gabrielle's biography took an unexpected turn when she joined the café concert Rotonde, a small cabaret in which she performed as a singer while Adrienne passed a hat around the room. It was here that Gabrielle earned the nickname Coco, which became her new identity. The name originated from songs in her repertoire, Coco Rico and Kikavu Coco. Rotonde drew the attention of affluent soldiers, who stood out for their free-spirited nature. They spent their afternoons in patisseries and their evenings in the cabaret. However, Coco preferred not to recall Rotonde. She enjoyed performing but longed for something greater. Paris. Fame had gone to her head, and she decided to move to Vichy to pursue a career in music halls. Everyone supported her aspirations as a singer, except for a man named Etienne Balson, who doubted her stage potential. Yet it was Balsan who changed her life, sparing her from becoming the wife of a fool and enduring a life of disappointment. Coco felt that this man had come into her life for a reason. Though Balsan lacked looks or stature, he was unique, a wealthy but eccentric man who adored horses and refused to live like everyone else. He treated Coco as a friend and showed no interest in making her his lover. She wasn't his type. His attention had been captured by Emilienne Delisson, a voluptuous courtesan for whom Coco would later design her first iconic hat. In Vichy, women like Coco were not welcomed with open arms. When her singing career failed, she returned to Moulins, where she was met with indifference. Coco returned to sewing, while Adrienne moved in with Mademoiselle, a commanding woman known as Maman. Maude's villa hosted sophisticated parties where men sought women's attention through lavish gifts. Adrienne quickly became Maude's favorite and began a romance with Baron Nexon, who risked losing his inheritance if he married a penniless woman. They were able to marry only after his father's death. At that point, Adrienne became Baroness Nexon. Meanwhile, things were far worse for Coco. Her attempt at a fresh start in Vichy left her in shock when she discovered that she was pregnant. It felt like a death sentence. A child meant shame and scorn. She refused to live on relatives' charity or marry a widower with children. Determined to have an abortion, Coco faced rejection from a midwife who warned her that, as it was her first pregnancy, she might never conceive again. However, Gabrielle made her choice. To her, a sin against an unborn child was better than a life of humiliation. After hearing Coco's family story, the midwife relented. Yet later, Coco deeply regretted the abortion. Adrienne had chosen her path, becoming Mademoiselle's protégée and marrying the Baron, a man who cared for her despite his reputation. Coco, on the other hand, had to conquer men, even those she didn't need. Throughout her life, no man could resist her. With her boyish figure, narrow hips, and small chest in an era that celebrated voluptuous forms, Coco understood that the only way forward was to change fashion itself. Balsan's interest in horses ignited her own passion for them. Thus, her ideas of style emerged. The first thing that caught her attention was the men's suit, particularly the jockey's trousers. Coco tailored a pair for herself as she became deeply involved in horseback riding while staying at Balsan's chateau. In addition, Coco began designing new hats. A Chanel hat was simple and elegant. The first client of the legendary straw hat by Chanel was Balsan's mistress, Emilienne Delisson. However, Coco quickly replaced her as the favorite. Etienne Balsan was never the main man in Coco's life, but it was thanks to him that she met her great love. During a trip to Spain, Coco met Arthur Capel, a friend of Balsan's. The dark-haired man with green eyes and an easygoing manner caught her attention. His intellect, composure, and skill in horseback riding inspired admiration from everyone. His friends called him Boy. He quickly became part of the horse lovers' circle and regularly attended their gatherings in Rouen. Everyone understood whom he came for. Coco knew that Capel saw her not as a kept woman, but as a real individual. Balsan warned her that Capel would never marry a woman without a prestigious name or lineage. However, Coco didn't listen and would pay dearly for it in the future. Arthur was illegitimate. He aspired to join high society, but he could do this only by marrying a noble woman. Clearly, Coco did not fit the role. For Coco, Arthur was not only the love of her life, but also the person who supported her ambition to revolutionize the fashion world. He provided her with money, advice, and mentorship. Funded by Capel, Coco opened a boutique in Paris, as well as at the fashionable resorts of Deauville and Biarritz. When Coco's business began making significant profit, she repaid Capel every cent he had invested, including interest. Capel hadn't expected to be repaid, but Coco sought independence. Nothing could stop her now. Not even war was a reason to step back. During World War I, Coco continued to work even though the conflict had engulfed Paris. Her fashion house, Gabrielle Chanel, was the only one left in the area. Coco made this decision at Capel's insistence. He foresaw that society ladies would flock to Deauville, as even during wartime they needed new outfits. It was here that Coco's revolution truly began. She never adapted to her clients. Rather, she made what she liked: loose-fitting, comfortable clothing crafted from soft materials that allowed for freedom of movement. The new rules of fashion weren't to everyone's taste. However, Deauville was deserted, and Coco's boutique became one of the few desirable places. Thus, the socialites were forced to accept her trends. When Paris became safer and the ladies returned, they brought Coco's fashion with them. Her fame grew rapidly, and her business flourished. Coco had achieved everything she dreamed of: work she loved, wealth, and comfort. However, she lacked the most important thing: a family. Coco often said that her life came down to a choice, and she chose her career. Arthur Capel's position in high society remained precarious. He was valued for his intelligence, education, and business acumen, but at every opportunity, people reminded him of his origins. He knew that marrying Coco would only worsen his standing. Coco was hurt, but she understood that he, like her, had chosen career over love. Their relationship was a union of two ambitious individuals who passionately loved and supported each other while keeping their affair hidden from the public. Ultimately, Capel married, but his bond with Coco didn't end. She was torn between love and hatred, wanting to break free from the relationship, but unable to do so. Everything ended in December 1919, when Arthur died in a car accident on his way to Cannes. Coco was devastated, but lingering in grief wasn't an option. Her future was at stake. By then, Coco was well known not just in Paris, but beyond. As noted earlier, instead of an abundance of flowers, lace, expensive fabrics, and complex designs, she chose minimalism, practicality, and the color black. Coco sewed clothes primarily for herself. Her figure did not conform to the beauty standards of the time, so she had no need for corsets or tight dresses. Her use of lingerie fabrics and jersey was not a deliberate challenge to society. Instead, it was a necessity. In the early stages of her career, she couldn't afford more expensive materials. The true essence of Coco's clothing was its versatility. Her simple silhouettes and cuts suited nearly all body types, eliminating the need for complex fittings. This made clothing production more accessible and laid the foundation for mass fashion. The name Chanel began carrying increasing weight, and Coco's social circle expanded. Intriguing connections filled her life. She had a talent for meeting fascinating people and being in the right place at the right time. This was precisely the case with Sergei Diaghilev, whom Coco met through mutual friends in Venice. At that time, Diaghilev's ballet and Ballet Russe were captivating Europe. These productions had a tremendous impact on fashion, inspiring the courtiers of the era. Ballet Russe created awe, and Diaghilev became a symbol of this cultural phenomenon. Despite his success, however, Diaghilev faced financial difficulties. By the time he met Coco, his situation was dire. He dreamed of reviving the production of Igor Stravinsky's The Rite of Spring. But Stravinsky himself was in a tough spot, burdened with caring for his sick wife and 4 children. Diaghilev didn't even have the funds for minimal expenses. Coco stepped in to help. She wrote Diaghilev a check for 300,000 francs, a huge sum at the time, and provided housing for Stravinsky's family at her countryside villa Bel Respiro. This gesture not only saved the production, but also marked the beginning of a long friendship, making Coco a patron of the arts. She and her close friend were the last visitors to Diaghilev's home the night before his death on August 19, 1929. They also paid for his funeral in Saint-Michel. Diaghilev died on her birthday, and from then on, Coco never celebrated it. Among Coco's new acquaintances, she also found love. Or perhaps that word is too grand for their relationship. She had a brief romance with Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich, a cousin of Nicholas II. As a result, Coco made several important, even life-changing connections. One such connection was with Samuel Goldwyn, one of the founders of American cinema. Goldwyn was interested in having actresses wear Coco's creations, not only on screen, but also in real life. He offered her a contract for an incredible sum, $1 million. For this amount, she was to travel to Hollywood twice a year and create designs specifically for movie stars. Coco did not agree immediately, but the collaboration proved successful. The work was challenging, requiring a personal touch, patience, and significant effort, but it became powerful advertising for the Chanel fashion house in the American market. Yet, despite her enthusiasm for America, Coco did not continue working with Goldwyn. Dressing actresses and accommodating their whims proved to be exhausting and thankless. This clashed with Coco's character. She was used to dictating her own, often contradictory rules of style. Another significant introduction facilitated by Dmitry Pavlovich was with Ernest Beaux, the man who in 1921 created Coco's one and only perfume, Chanel No. 5. Coco was deeply dissatisfied with the perfumes of her time. Everything about them annoyed her, from the scents to the bottles and names. Most of all, Coco was displeased with their longevity, or lack thereof. Women had to reapply perfume every half hour, practically drenching themselves in it. The chemist Ernest Beaux proposed a solution, a formula with a subtle yet lasting trail. He presented several samples to Coco, and she chose the fifth one. Keeping things simple, she named the perfume Chanel No. 5 and left it in the same medicinal-style bottle in which Ernest had delivered the samples. Beaux was surprised by this decision because at the time, perfume bottles were often elaborate works of art. However, Coco remained true to her love for simplicity. The result exceeded all expectations. Chanel No. 5 took Paris by storm. The bottles sold so quickly that the production facilities of the Raleigh Company, with which Coco collaborated, couldn't keep up with demand. Théophile Beggar, the founder of Galeries Lafayette, stepped in to help. He introduced Coco to Pierre and Paul Wertheimer, experts in the perfume business. They proposed creating the company Parfum Chanel. This marked a critical step in developing the brand. The company's shares were divided in an unusual way. 10% went to Coco, 20% went to Théophile Beggar, who provided his warehouses and the resources of Galeries Lafayette, and 70% went to the Wertheimer brothers. At first, everything went well. However, Coco later realized the mistake she had made. The Wertheimers expanded production abroad, using front companies to register enterprises. While Chanel No. 5 achieved tremendous global success, Coco's income from the business dwindled each year. This led to a years-long conflict between Coco and the Wertheimers. As noted, men played an important role in Coco's life. She was always a mistress, but never a wife. Only once did a relationship almost end in marriage. This was Coco's romance with the Duke of Westminster, whom she called Mondor. Their relationship began in 1925 with the Duke's persistent courtship. He showered Coco with jewels, enormous bouquets from his greenhouse, and invitations aboard his yacht. However, Coco, already possessing significant wealth, did not want to appear bought. In response, she gave the Duke equally lavish gifts, thereby asserting her independence. The Duke made Coco the mistress of his Eaton Hall estate, a move that shocked English society, which maintained strict traditions and Victorian values. Positioning a rootless Frenchwoman, even a famous one, as the hostess of Eaton Hall was seen as a scandalous affront. However, no one dared oppose the Duke. Coco spent most of her time in England, returning to France only occasionally to oversee her business. Later, she opened a branch of her fashion house in London. Her romance with the Duke brought her not only new acquaintances, including a friendship with Winston Churchill, but also valuable inspiration. During trips to Scotland, she discovered tweed, which became a hallmark of her collections. She also incorporated striped vests, jackets with gold buttons, sporty coats, brimless berets resembling those worn by the Duke's servants, and fine sweaters adorned with jewelry. Coco's relationship with the Duke seemed perfect, and he appeared to be ready to marry her. However, over time, Coco noticed his infidelities. She realized that marriage wouldn't change his habits, and she didn't want to be a wife forced to share her husband. Moreover, marriage would have meant the end of her career. As the Duke's mistress, she could remain a couturière, dressing Europe, while as his wife, she would lose that freedom. "I decided that being a duchess wasn't worth it," she said. "There are many duchesses, but there is only one Chanel." Thus, the romance ended. Once again, Coco chose her work and independence over a man. A pragmatic person, Coco was prone to embellishing stories about her life, but one fact is undeniable. She collaborated with the Nazis. It's also possible that she aided the French resistance. Coco had a long-term affair with Hans Gunther von Dinklage, a Nazi agent. Her acquaintance with him and other Nazis helped her secure the release of her beloved nephew André, a French army officer, from a German POW camp. Most biographers agree that freeing her nephew was Coco's initial motivation for cooperating with the Nazis. However, over time, as Gerlich writes, she went beyond family duty. When her finances were stable, Coco paid little attention to her perfumes. However, with the outbreak of World War II, she had to close her fashion house, and income became a critical issue. Thus, Coco turned her attention to the profits from her perfume business. She unsuccessfully attempted to use Nazi Aryan supremacy laws, which prohibited Jews from owning businesses, to seize control of her perfume company from her Jewish partners. Shortly after the liberation of Paris, French authorities questioned Coco about her connections with the Nazis. However, she was released within hours. Historians suggest that her easy escape was partly due to her friendship with Churchill, whether or not he directly intervened. Later, to avoid retribution, Coco moved to Switzerland. She lived there for nearly 10 years. Her affair with Spatz continued for many years after the war, and her wartime activities never resulted in official consequences. Having closed her fashion house in 1939, Coco returned to work only in 1954 at the age of 71. Navigating the post-war fashion world, dominated by men like Dior and Balenciaga, was not easy. Before the war, women like Chanel, Schiaparelli, Lanvin, and Vionnet had been at the forefront. Now, the times had changed. The Parisian public, weary from the hardships of war, craved vibrant emotions and celebration. The simplicity of Coco's designs no longer sparked the same admiration it once had. Fashion was embracing bold experiments that turned clothing into art, or, in Coco's opinion, into monstrosities. Her first post-war collection was a disappointment in Paris and was deemed a failure. However, in America, the reaction was different. There, Coco was met with enthusiasm, proving that her style still had the power to captivate hearts. She continued to dictate fashion, dressing Hollywood stars. In the 1950s and 1960s, Coco collaborated with Hollywood studios designing outfits for Audrey Hepburn, Elizabeth Taylor, and others. Among her clients was the First Lady of the United States, Jacqueline Kennedy. Coco also supported artists like Salvador Dali and Pablo Picasso. However, in the 1960s, her fashion house lost prominence when she rejected the idea of miniskirts. She considered them incompatible with her aesthetic. Coco passed away on January 10, 1971, at the age of 87, from a heart attack in the Ritz Hotel. After her death, the Chanel fashion house fell into decline. It regained its vitality only in 1983 with the arrival of Karl Lagerfeld. Gabrielle Chanel was unafraid to challenge conventions, break barriers, and set new standards. She transformed simplicity into luxury, and she made independence into a symbol of strength. Neither a difficult childhood nor poverty could stop her. Her dramas and struggles became sources of inspiration, and her style and approach to fashion revolutionized women's clothing. She demonstrated that even the most challenging circumstances can become the starting point for creating a legend.